Ireland, land of Guinness, potatoes, snakes, by which I mean there aren't any, and a band named after a Canadian horror film. Yes, My Bloody Valentine, pretty much the only Irish thing that I really care about much. My Bloody Valentine, among many things, are responsible for this album Loveless, represented by its woozy pink album art. The sound of Loveless is generally referred to as shoegaze. If you don't know what that is, well, you know, there's a thing called Google that exists. It should be able to help. Anyway, it might be too complex for me to explain the whole concept of shoegaze myself, so just see what you can make of it from Googling, or go listen to this album, or keep watching this video and you might get a better idea of what represents shoegaze. Because this album and its associated aesthetics sum up the main common elements of shoegaze pretty nicely. And yes, this album is generally considered peak shoegaze by fans of the genre, or just fans of music in general. It sure gets around on those all-time greatest album lists, and I'm going to be upfront about it. I'm certainly not going to dispute either of those viewpoints, because this album is goddamn awesome. The album's kinda heavy with its dense production and distorted guitars, but it also manages to be very dreamy in its delivery. But not in a loud, quiet, loud, typical 90s alternative song structure kind of way. No, Loveless often manages to be both heavy and dreamy at the same time. And that's probably the best thing that I could make a point of when talking about how much I love shoegaze. So after I heard Loveless, I was definitely sold on the whole shoegazing thing, and I've been listening to tons of releases by shoegaze bands, or just shoegaze-inspired bands. So basically, if you can link a band even remotely to shoegaze, then I'm definitely going to at least consider listening to them. Another big selling point with shoegaze is the unique and often powerful sounds created by the guitars, thanks to one or both of a shitload of effect pedals and a shitload of overdubbed recordings. Bands like this can create sounds that you can really feel, you know, stuff that makes you think, what the fuck is going on here? And Kevin Shields, who had a hand in about 75% of all the processes related to making this album, was a massive trailblazer in that regard. He seemed to very much value the texture of the guitar sound over the notes and chord progressions being played, coupled with his so-called glide guitar technique that would bend the notes as he was strumming them.
Instead of just going, you know, I got it.
His guitar textures pretty much blew everyone else out of the water at the time, or at any other time for that matter. It's a real fantastic journey of sounds, from the wailing elephant-style lead of opener Only Shallow, to the rumbling drones of To Hear Knows When, the floaty lead line of I Only Said, and the roaring faux acoustic ballad Sometimes. Shields was so creative and resourceful with his playing and his effects that there could have been a song that only had 3 or 4 guitar parts playing on it at once for all I know, but he still would have managed to make it sound like a guitar orchestra. The other thing that really gives Loveless its signature sound is what sounds like synthesizers but is actually just a sampler keyboard. So instead of using a regular synth for those melodies, Shields took some recordings of guitar, or the feedback from the amp that it caused, and played it at different pitches to create those particular melodies. It creates something that's kind of disorienting the way that it sounds like ordinary synths, but not quite. In fact, Shields also used that sampler for drums on most of the songs, as the band's actual drummer, Old mate here, he was too ill to drum for most of the recording process, I believe. So Shields sampled the few drum parts that Old Mate was able to play and played the drum lines on most of the songs based off of that. Shields also took care of Debbie Googe's bass guitar duties on the album, though she was always available to play those herself, unlike Old Mate. Make of that what you will. But anyway, the bass is pretty inessential on the album. Aside from the groovy bass line in the song Soon, I generally tend to not notice the bass at all. And lastly, Shields also wrote the music for all of the tracks bar one, and was the album's main producer. So that's what I mean by him being responsible for about 75% of the making of Loveless. Might even be a higher percentage than that. But thankfully, the man knew what he was doing, so I guess it worked out in the end. The effects and production on the album overshadow the songwriting so much that it could take you a bunch of listens before you really start to think about it and realize that the songs are actually pretty basic. But the key thing is that they still carry pretty melodies, both the vocals and the sampler lines. Also, the vocals, if you can actually understand them, are basically nonsense. Of course, I take lyrics much less seriously than most people, so that was never likely to bother me. But it shouldn't matter much to other people either, because 1, they're buried under all these wonderful noises, and 2, songs like Sometimes and What You Want still manage to bring the feels, even if Shields and or Belinda Butcher are singing about nothing in particular. Loveless is a masterclass in a band cancelling out their inherent weaknesses in songwriting and performance by allowing their strengths to dominate the record. Like I kind of said earlier, there aren't any albums released before Loveless that sound like it, to my knowledge. Even most albums released after Loveless don't come close to achieving the stuff that My Bloody Valentine did here. I think the closest I've heard is bands that imitate one or two different unofficial trademarks of My Bloody Valentine, like pitch-bending guitar or breathy vocals buried in the mix. But very few shoegaze bands, in fact not too many non-shoegaze bands either, have come close to the ambitiousness of Kevin Shields on Loveless. And of course, the making of the album was also fraught with difficulty. It took around 2 straight years of recording to make, involved around 20 different recording studios and engineers each, and the total cost of making it probably would have sunk their record label forever if they didn't end up signing Oasis a few years later. So maybe musicians since then haven't wanted to risk these sort of repercussions in making an album like this. Or maybe it's more the fact that very few people approach music making the same way Kevin Shields does. But for whatever reason, Loveless really does stand on its own, in the best possible way. And I'm going to leave it at that since there's already thousands of videos and articles about Loveless out there, so I probably have nothing new to say about it. But anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, maybe even share these videos around, spread the word if you really feel like it, every little thing helps. And click the top right of this video to vote on the type of video you want to see next. So yep, see ya.